The air hung heavy, a suffocating blanket of humidity that clung to my skin. I was soaked through, not from rain, but the sweat that beaded on my forehead, trickling down my neck. It was a moonless night, the inky sky swallowing the stars, leaving only the faint glow of the Milky Way as a pale, unblinking eye. Every other sound was drowned out by the ceaseless chirping of crickets, a symphony of unease in the silence. My heart thumped against my ribs, a frantic drum solo in the hollow space of my chest. My boots crunched on the dirt path, each step a hesitant echo in the stillness. The cornfield, a verdant maze that stretched for acres, loomed around me, its stalks swaying like spectral fingers in the unseen breeze. The air felt charged, thick with an anticipation that prickled my skin. It was the abandoned house that drew me here, a skeletal silhouette against the starless sky. Local legends whispered of its haunting history, stories passed down through generations, tales of a family lost to a fire, their tortured cries echoing through the empty rooms. The stories always ended with a chilling warning: don't go near the house, especially on a moonless night. But curiosity, a relentless monster, had gnawed at me for weeks. Tonight, I was finally succumbing to its insatiable appetite. Despite the gnawing fear that twisted my gut, I found myself drawn closer, the flickering lights in the house acting as a siren's call. The house was a relic, its paint peeling like dead skin, its windows vacant eyes staring blankly into the night. Every window seemed to hold a different light, their intensity wavering, as if a spectral hand was turning a dial, dimming and brightening them in a chaotic dance. It was a sight that sent a shiver down my spine, a chilling beauty that both fascinated and terrified me. I felt my breath hitch in my throat as I inched closer. The cornstalks rustled around me, their dry leaves whispering secrets on the wind. I imagined the ghosts of the past, their spectral forms flitting around the house, their mournful cries lost in the night. The lights, now a swirling kaleidoscope of colors, pulsed with an unnatural energy. It felt as if the house itself was breathing, its unseen heart pumping with an energy that resonated in my bones. I could feel the pull, a magnetic force that drew me towards the house, towards the source of the lights. I had been told that those lights were the remnants of lost souls trying to communicate, a desperate plea from the other side. I didn't believe in ghosts, not really. But standing there, under the oppressive silence of the night, the chilling beauty of the house, and the pulsating lights, something shifted within me. A flicker of doubt, a whisper of fear, seeped into my rational mind. I pushed the doubt aside. It was just a trick of the light, an illusion playing on my overactive imagination. I was a skeptic, a pragmatist. It was just an empty house, nothing more, nothing less. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself, the fear a cold coil constricting my stomach. I had come this far, I wouldn't turn back now. I pushed through the tall, rustling cornstalks, the last remnants of the field separating me from the imposing silhouette of the house. The closer I got, the more vivid the lights became. I could see them clearly now, swirling, pulsating, dancing in a mesmerizing ballet. I felt drawn to the light, to the source of the strange, almost seductive energy. As I neared the porch, a faint hum filled the air. The hairs on my arms stood on end, tingling with a mixture of fear and fascination. The house felt alive, pulsing with an unseen power. My hand, trembling slightly, reached out to the weathered porch railing. The wood was rough under my touch, cold and damp. I took a step onto the porch. The moment I did, a cold blast of air swept over me, almost knocking me off my feet. The hum grew louder, throbbing in my ears like a heartbeat. I felt a sudden urge to flee, to turn and run back into the safety of the cornfield. But the pull of the lights, the relentless energy that emanated from the house, held me captive. I reached out, my hand outstretched towards one of the windows. The light seemed to beckon me, its flickering intensity mesmerizing. It seemed to pulse in time with the throbbing hum, an eerie symphony of light and sound. The house creaked, its bones groaning under the weight of the unseen energy. The windows seemed to shift, distorted by the dancing light. A wave of dizziness washed over me, my senses overwhelmed by the intensity of the lights. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold and clammy. I flinched, turning around slowly. My heart hammered in my chest. There was no one there. But the feeling of being watched lingered, a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I spun around, searching the porch, the shadows of the house, for any sign of movement. Nothing. Just the empty porch, bathed in the pulsing, hypnotic light. I felt a bead of sweat roll down my temple, a cold trickle against my skin. My breath caught in my throat. The hum intensified, now a deafening roar that vibrated in my bones. Then, from deep within the house, a chilling laugh echoed through the night. It was a sound that sent shivers down my spine, a sound that seemed to seep into my very soul. Terror gripped me, a cold vice squeezing my lungs. I stumbled back, my feet tangled in the thick, overgrown weeds that choked the porch. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to run, to escape the terrible, chilling laughter, to get as far away from the house as possible. I turned to flee, but the laughter rose again, louder, more menacing, as if the house itself was laughing at my fear. I felt a cold hand grasp my arm, pulling me back towards the house. It was as if the house itself was pulling me closer, its unseen energy dragging me towards its darkness. I struggled, my legs like lead, my heart pounding in my chest. But the hand was relentless, pulling me towards the house, towards the pulsing lights, towards the source of the chilling laughter. I screamed, a desperate cry lost in the darkness, a pathetic plea in the face of the unseen terror that held me captive. I felt myself being pulled closer, my body a puppet controlled by an unseen hand. Then darkness. I woke to the sound of birds chirping, the sun filtering through the leaves of the trees. I was lying on the edge of the cornfield, the abandoned house just visible in the distance. The sky was a clear, brilliant blue, the air fresh and crisp. The night felt like a distant, horrifying dream, a nightmare I desperately wanted to forget. I stumbled to my feet, my body aching, my clothes damp with sweat and dew. I looked back at the house, its windows now dark, its silhouette stark against the bright morning light. It seemed to be just another derelict house, a silent witness to the passage of time, its secrets hidden behind its weathered walls. I knew I had been there, I knew the chilling laughter, the pulsating light, the terrifying grip of the unseen hand. But now, as I stood in the light of the new day, I felt a wave of doubt wash over me. Was it real, or just a figment of my imagination, a product of a night spent alone in the field, fueled by local legends and a morbid curiosity? I turned and walked away, my steps hesitant, my head filled with questions. I looked back one last time. The house stood silent and still, its secrets locked away within its shadowed walls. It seemed to be watching me, its vacant windows staring, waiting. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was not just a house, but a living entity, a dark presence that haunted the night. I knew I would never be able to erase that night from my memory, the chilling laughter, the pulsing lights, the terrifying grip of the unseen hand. The experience had changed me, imprinted a deep-seated fear in my soul, a reminder that some things are better left undisturbed, some places better avoided. I left the cornfield, the haunting image of the house etched forever in my mind, a chilling reminder of the night I walked into the darkness, and the darkness that walked back with me. In the labyrinthine depths of the corn maze, where towering stalks cast eerie shadows and whispered secrets, I found myself trapped in a nightmarish dance with the unknown. The laughter and camaraderie that had once echoed through the golden pathways had turned into a chilling symphony of terror. It had all started as an innocent escapade, a group of friends, a bag of pot, and a desire to escape the mundane. But as the potent smoke filled our lungs, a sinister undercurrent began to creep into our consciousness. Dave, usually the most jovial of the bunch, suddenly gripped his head with a trembling hand. "Wait, something's wrong," he gasped, his voice laced with a note of abject fear. "I'm seeing things." We exchanged bewildered glances. "What do you mean, Dave?" Sarah asked. But before he could elaborate, a gut-wrenching scream tore through the crisp autumn air. Dave collapsed to the ground, his body convulsing violently. We rushed to his aid, but the horror that unfolded before our eyes sent shivers down our spines. As if possessed by an unseen force, Dave arched his back at an impossible angle and snapped his own neck with an audible crack. His eyes bulged in terror, frozen in a moment of unspeakable agony. Panic surged through us like an electric current. We scrambled to our feet, desperate to escape this nightmare. Sarah and John took one direction, while Emily and I fled in the opposite. Lost and alone in the endless rows of corn, I stumbled through the darkness, the sound of my own ragged breathing echoing through the stalks. Fear gnawed at my mind, whispering doubts and fueling my paranoia. Suddenly, I heard a faint rustling sound behind me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. Slowly, I turned my head, my eyes scanning the shadows. There, in the dim glow of the distant streetlights, I saw it, a grotesque figure, cloaked in the darkness. Its eyes glowed an eerie red, like the embers of a dying fire. A cold shiver ran down my spine as a realization struck me. This was no ordinary corn maze. Something malevolent lurked within its depths, something that had claimed Dave's life and was now hunting us relentlessly. With newfound determination, I surged forward, desperate to escape the clutches of the unseen terror. I ran and ran, my lungs burning, my legs aching. But no matter how fast I went, the figure seemed to glide effortlessly behind me. Finally, as hope began to dwindle, I stumbled upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood an old, abandoned shed. Its weathered walls and broken windows hinted at a forgotten past. I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. The shed could either be a sanctuary or a death trap. But with nowhere else to turn, I cautiously approached, my senses on high alert. As I reached the shed, I noticed a faint light emanating from beneath the door. With trembling hands, I pushed it open, revealing a small, dusty interior. In the dim light, I saw a figure sitting on a wooden stool. It was a young woman, her long, dark hair hanging in disarray around her pale face. Her eyes were wide and vacant, and her body was covered in blood. Before I could even react, she turned her head towards me, her lips parting in a grotesque smile. "You're lost," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of leaves. "But you're not alone." A wave of terror washed over me as I realized that this woman was no ordinary victim. She was a harbinger of death, a creature that fed on the souls of the lost. Mustering all my remaining strength, I stumbled backwards and turned to flee. But the shed's door had somehow vanished, leaving me trapped with the monstrous woman. She rose from her stool, her movements fluid and predatory. As she approached me, I could see that her eyes were glowing the same eerie red as the figure I had seen in the cornfield. "You can't escape me," she hissed. "You're mine now." With a swift lunge, she grabbed my arm and pulled me towards her. I struggled with all my might, but her grip was like iron. As her cold, dead fingers wrapped around my throat, I felt my life slipping away. In a moment of desperation, I remembered Dave's dying words. Had the joints been laced with something else? Could there be a way to fight off this evil? With a surge of adrenaline, I bit down on my own hand, hard enough to draw blood. As the warm, metallic taste filled my mouth, I screamed into the woman's face, hoping to distract her. To my astonishment, it worked. She recoiled, her eyes wide with surprise. The hand around my throat loosened for a moment, and I seized the opportunity to break free. I stumbled backwards, panting heavily. The woman remained in the shadows, her eyes still glowing red. But for the first time, I sensed a flicker of hesitation in her gaze. "What are you?" I demanded, my voice trembling. She laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound. "I am what you fear most. I am the darkness that lies within you, waiting to consume you." "No," I said, my resolve hardening. "I am stronger than that." The woman hissed and lunged towards me once more. But this time, I was ready. I dodged her attack and ran for the door that had mysteriously reappeared. As I burst through the opening, I saw the clearing bathed in the dim light of dawn. The figure of the cloaked creature was nowhere to be seen. I had escaped the nightmare, but the memory of that night would forever haunt my waking hours. I knew that the darkness would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike again. But for now, I was safe. I stumbled towards the edge of the corn maze, my legs heavy and my mind reeling. As I reached the road that led back to civilization, I turned and looked back at the labyrinthine field. In the distance, I could see a faint glow, the remains of the abandoned shed. And as I watched, the glow seemed to twist and writhe, like the body of some unseen creature. I shivered and quickened my pace, determined to leave the horrors of the corn maze behind me. But deep down, I knew that the darkness would never truly be gone. It would always be there, whispering in the shadows, waiting for its chance to consume me once more. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the vast expanse of Stock's farm. The cornstalks, standing tall like silent sentinels, whispered secrets in the gentle breeze. It was a familiar scene, one that had played out every summer of my childhood. My father, a lifelong laborer at the farm, had always shared tales of the cornfield's enigmatic nature. If you ever feel lost, he would often say, his eyes twinkling with both amusement and a touch of caution, look for your tracks, they'll lead you out. His words echoed in my mind as I watched my younger cousins, Junior and Pelin, scampering about the edge of the field. Their laughter carried on the wind, a carefree melody in the fading light. Suddenly, a mischievous gleam in Junior's eyes caught my attention. With a mischievous grin, he darted into the dense rows of corn, his tiny legs disappearing into the green labyrinth. "Junior!" Pelin called out, his voice laced with mock concern. "Don't get lost!" Without hesitation, Pelin and I gave chase, our bare feet pounding against the soft earth. We followed the faint trail left by Junior's footprints, deeper and deeper into the heart of the cornfield. The rows seemed to stretch endlessly before us, creating a disorienting maze that swallowed us whole. As the sun dipped below the horizon, darkness enveloped the field like a suffocating blanket. The familiar landmarks disappeared, replaced by an eerie silence that gnawed at our nerves. Panic began to creep into my heart as I realized we had gone too far. "Pelin, stop!" I shouted, my voice trembling. "We're too deep!" But my pleas fell on deaf ears. Junior, lost in the thrill of the chase, surged ahead, his tiny form barely visible in the fading light. Pelin, with unwavering determination, followed close behind. I hesitated for a moment, torn between my fear and my loyalty to my cousins. Then, with a deep breath, I plunged into the unknown. As the darkness closed in around us, a sense of isolation washed over me. The tall stalks of corn seemed to press against me, suffocating and oppressive. I stumbled and tripped, my heart pounding erratically in my chest. Fear gnawed at my mind, whispering doubts and amplifying every creak and groan of the cornfield. Suddenly, I heard a faint cry. It was Pelin's voice, filled with terror. I stumbled towards the sound, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I approached, I saw a sight that sent shivers down my spine. Pelin stood frozen in the middle of a clearing, his eyes wide with fear. Junior was nowhere to be seen. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Pelin's gaze met mine, and I saw a darkness in his eyes that I had never seen before. "Junior's still out there," he murmured, his voice trembling. "And something's hunting him." A chill ran down my spine as realization dawned upon me. I had heard whispered tales among the farmhands about a malevolent entity that lurked within the cornfield, a witch with a thirst for vengeance. Could it be that Junior had somehow fallen prey to this supernatural terror? Fear propelled me forward. I grabbed Pelin's hand and together we retraced our steps, desperate to escape the clutches of the cornfield and whatever horrors it concealed. But as we stumbled through the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak and groan of the corn seemed to whisper a sinister warning, reminding us that the night was far from over. Just when I thought my nerves could take no more, we stumbled upon a faint glow in the distance. It was the farmhouse, our sanctuary in the midst of this nightmare. With renewed determination, we surged towards the light, our hearts pounding with both fear and relief. As we burst through the door, my father and aunt, their faces etched with worry, rushed towards us. "Where's Junior?" my aunt demanded, her voice trembling. Pelin's gaze dropped to the floor, and he shook his head. "He's still out there," he whispered. My father's expression hardened. "We need to find him," he said, his voice grim. And so began a frantic search that lasted throughout the night. My father and the other farmhands combed the cornfield, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. But as the hours passed, hope began to dwindle. As dawn approached, I sat by the window, watching the sky slowly lighten. Exhaustion and anxiety had taken their toll on my body and mind. Suddenly, a soft knock on the door startled me. I opened it to find Pelin standing there, alone. "What happened?" I asked, my heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. Pelin's gaze met mine, and a shiver ran down my spine. "Junior's still out there," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "And something's hunting him." I gasped, my mind reeling from the revelation. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. Pelin's eyes widened, and he glanced over his shoulder, as if afraid of being overheard. I saw something," he whispered. "Something dark and evil." My heart skipped a beat. "What did you see?" I asked, leaning closer. Pelin hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward and whispered a single word that sent a chill down my spine: La Bruja. The witch. The stories I had dismissed as mere superstition now seemed horrifyingly real. Could it be that Junior had fallen victim to the malevolent entity that haunted the cornfield? As the sun rose higher in the sky, my father returned, his face etched with despair. The search had been fruitless. Junior was gone. My aunt, her voice heavy with grief, turned to me. "No fue la bruja," she whispered, her eyes filled with both sorrow and accusation. "Did the witch take Junior?" I couldn't bear to think about it. But as I looked into Pelin's haunted eyes, I knew that he believed it with all his heart. Years later, I still returned to Stock's farm every summer. The cornfield remains a place of both beauty and mystery, a reminder of the night that changed our lives forever. And though I have never seen any evidence of the witch, I can't shake the feeling that she is always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for her next victim. A scarecrow stood in the middle of the field, its straw-stuffed body swaying gently in the breeze, its ragged clothes flapping like a tattered flag. It was unlike any scarecrow I had ever seen before. Its face, carved from an old pumpkin, was twisted into a grotesque grin. Its eyes, two glittering black buttons, seemed to follow my every movement. There was something about it, something about the way it stood so starkly out of place, deep within the field where no farmer would dare to plant it, that sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. But even as I tried to rationalize, a primal fear coiled in my stomach, telling me to get out of there, run as fast as I could. But something held me rooted to the spot, a morbid curiosity that was stronger than my fear. I took a tentative step forward, my boots crunching on the dry leaves, the sound echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. As I approached, the scarecrow seemed to grow larger, its features becoming more grotesque with each step. Its grin widened, its eyes seemed to glint with an unholy light. I knew I should keep moving, but my legs felt like lead, my heart hammering against my ribs. I stopped a few feet away, my gaze fixed on the scarecrow, my mind struggling to make sense of it. I swore I saw its tattered coat flutter in the breeze, a single, jerky movement that seemed almost intentional. I took another step back, my eyes frantically scanning the field, searching for an escape route. That's when I noticed it. The scarecrow was moving. It was only a slight shift, a barely perceptible sway, but it was enough to tell me that it wasn't just the wind. It was moving towards me. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear, as the scarecrow slowly advanced towards me. It wasn't running, it wasn't even moving quickly, but its slow, deliberate movements were somehow more terrifying than any sudden attack. It was as if it was toying with me, savoring my fear, relishing the sight of me cowering in its presence. Its eyes followed me, never leaving my face, and in those vacant, black button eyes I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't hatred, not exactly. It was something older, something more primal, something that felt like a hunger that had been dormant for centuries, finally waking up. The scarecrow was almost upon me, its ragged clothes brushing against the cornstalks, the sound a chilling rasp. It stopped a few feet away, its eyes boring into mine. Then, it gestured towards the cornfield, its long, skeletal arm pointing towards a hidden path that I hadn't noticed before. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, trying to find a way to escape. But the scarecrow's gesture, the silent plea in its vacant eyes, held me frozen in place. It was as if it was trying to warn me, to tell me something important. But what? I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I looked back at the scarecrow, its gaze fixed on me, its grotesque grin widening, and I knew, with an absolute certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had to follow it. I took a step forward, my legs trembling, my heart pounding in my chest. The scarecrow stood still, its eyes following my every movement, its presence a chilling beacon in the darkness. I stepped deeper into the cornfield, the shadows closing in around me, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the cloying sweetness of overripe corn. I followed the scarecrow, my fear now mingled with a strange sense of anticipation. It led me deeper and deeper into the field, away from the familiar path, into the heart of the darkness. The cornstalks brushed against my face, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind that I couldn't understand. The moon was hidden behind a cloud, and the darkness was almost absolute. I could barely see the scarecrow ahead of me, its ragged clothes blending in with the shadows. But I could feel its presence, its eyes on me, its silent plea echoing in my mind. I walked for what seemed like hours, my legs aching, my mind numb with fear. Then the scarecrow stopped, its long, skeletal arm pointing towards a small clearing in the cornfield. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The clearing was bathed in an otherworldly light, a strange, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. In the center of the clearing, there was a small, circular stone structure, its surface covered in moss and lichen. I felt a sense of recognition, as if I had seen it before, in a dream perhaps, or in some forgotten memory. The stone structure hummed with an ancient energy, a power that seemed to thrum through the earth itself. Suddenly, the sky began to crackle with energy, and a bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating the clearing in a blinding flash. For a moment, the scarecrow was bathed in the light, its features becoming clearer, its eyes burning with an unholy fire. Then, the light vanished as quickly as it had appeared, and the scarecrow was gone. It was as if it had never been there. I stood there, alone in the clearing, my mind racing, my heart pounding in my chest. What had I seen? What was this place? I looked at the stone structure, its surface now pulsing with a faint, green glow. I reached out and touched it, the cool stones sending a shiver down my spine. The stone structure seemed to vibrate beneath my touch, and a voice echoed in my mind, a voice ancient and powerful, whispering secrets that I couldn't quite understand. I felt a sense of dread, a primal fear that made my hair stand on end. The voice told me that I was chosen, that I was destined to play a role in something grand and terrible. It spoke of a power that had slumbered for centuries, a power that was about to awaken, a power that would change the world forever. I pulled my hand away from the stone structure, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice was gone, but the feeling of dread remained. I stood there for what seemed like hours, paralyzed by fear and confusion. Then I turned and ran, running as fast as I could, my legs burning, my lungs screaming for air. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get out of there. I ran through the cornfield, the stalks brushing against my face, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind. I ran until I could run no more, collapsing on the ground, gasping for breath. It was dawn when I finally stumbled out of the cornfield, my clothes torn, my body aching. I was lost, alone, and terrified. But I knew one thing: I would never forget what I had seen that night. I had seen the scarecrow, the one that seemed to be alive, the one that had led me to a hidden place, a place of ancient power and untold terror. And I knew, with an absolute certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I had just been given a glimpse into something dark and terrible, something that had been sleeping for centuries, but was now stirring, and I had been chosen to play a role in its awakening. I haven't been back to that cornfield since. The memory of that night haunts me still, the scarecrow's vacant eyes, its silent plea, its grotesque smile, forever etched in my mind. I know that somewhere out there, in the shadows of the cornfield, the scarecrow still stands waiting. Waiting for the time when the ancient power awakens, waiting for the day when the darkness it represents will consume the world. And I know, with a dread that chills me to the core, that I'll be there to see it happen. I can't escape my destiny, no matter how hard I try. The cornfield holds me captive, and I know, with an icy certainty, that I'll be returning to it one day. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I know the scarecrow will be waiting, and I will be forced to face the terrible truth that I have seen. I am forever changed. The scarecrow's chilling presence, its silent plea, its grotesque smile, it's a burden I will carry for the rest of my days. It's a secret that will forever haunt me, a truth that I can never escape. And every night, when the moon is high in the sky, casting long, skeletal shadows across the fields, I can almost hear the scarecrow's ragged clothes fluttering in the breeze, its eyes following me, waiting for me to return.